Our next speaker is Garry Edwards. He's the Managing Director and CEO of AAM Investment Group. You've got Gary's CV there in your guide, in your program, sorry. He's involved in investments in a whole range of different areas of agriculture, including livestock marketing, value-added commodity marketing and processing and property development. And he's been involved in those areas for a long while. So someone with a lot of experience and some real hands-on knowledge of the whole issue of investment in agriculture is Garry. So please welcome him to the stage.
Thank you, Mick, and thank you to the Farm Institute, the Australian Farm Institute, for the opportunity to speak to you today. What I'm going to do is take you through a little bit of context. I know a lot of you will know much of what the first few slides are about, but then I'm going to talk about, I guess, our company understanding and thoughts as we work through this process of the reality that causes us challenges in getting investments over the line. One of the most frustrating things of being in this sector is you do an incredible amount of work for a reasonably low level of conversions. And one of the greatest challenge in that, and some of that goes directly to what Richard was just talking about, in that the lack of understanding within the broader agricultural community, I'm generalising here, of unsophisticated farming situations where they believe that the concept of presenting the appropriate financials and business plans is getting their local lawyer and their tax returns given to you, or a shoebox of receipts or envelopes, and somehow you need to convert that into a professional investment strategy, business plan, and an exit strategy. Because one of the most salient things that Richard just touched on, and it's actually the very first thing we do these days, is what I call the divorce. If we can't agree on what the divorce is going to be, the exit plan, before we start, the deal does not matter. Because when you're taking other people into it, you're dealing with investments and what that strategy is, and understanding that that matches what people are interested in, whether it be succession planning, whether it be partnerships, whether it be full takeouts, no matter what it is, we need to understand that we have an appropriate mechanism in whatever period of time, and quite frankly, from a company perspective, we look at usually 10-year plus outcomes. Some of the outcomes we're working on at the moment, or the investments we have, are 30-year outcomes already. So they're very long-term commitments. Agriculture is not something that we view in and getting in and out of today or tomorrow, unless there is an investment. We have had a couple where we have got involved in investments, and then somebody 2 or 3 or 4 years later decided they really needed to own it a whole lot more than we did. So we're happy to sell to them. But that is the exception rather than the rule, and it's certainly one of the great challenges we have in working through it. So a little bit about AAM and some of the projects. As Mick mentioned, probably the sector that we're most publicly known for is what we do in agricultural infrastructure projects. And by that, and the interest there and the comments around superannuation funds, with our partners, Palisade Investment Partners in Sydney, there was an initiative started back in 2007, which is one of the first mainstream investments of Australian superannuation funds in large, modern, regional livestock processing or marketing facilities. That entire initiative today, that last year represented over $1 billion in livestock sales for regional and rural Australia, has been totally funded by Australian superannuation funds. Totally funded. So there's no offshore money, there's no other private money. That is, I guess, one of the true exceptions to the rule. We had the very fortunate experience of being involved in meat processing for a period of time. Certainly nowhere near as long as our dear friend Mr. Fletcher last night, and certainly we don't have the experience that he has. 1 week, we thought we knew a fair bit about it when we got into it. 1 week into it, we realised we knew nothing. And that was an interesting situation, and that was, the counterparty involved with that was one of the major retailers. So it was an interesting challenge, and it turned out to be one of the most profitable investments that we've ever done in history. As I said, because somebody decided at a particular time they needed to own it a whole lot more than we did. As you can see there, the various things in regards to the supply chain initiatives. Technology. Technology is an interesting concept. We believe purely in the investment in technology in the ag world. You may or may not know that one of the founding things that we're involved in back in 2003 is a company called Livestock Exchange. Livestock Exchange, when we departed, was the largest provider of livestock traceability and management systems and marketing systems across the country and had 95% market share. Through that system, there's over $8 billion of livestock trade. And fundamentally, the whole basis of that was our investment in regards to how to make the national livestock traceability system for cattle at the time a value add or a cost benefit rather than simply a cost. And that was the key outcome of what developed it and the investment in that technology of what is today the National Livestock Identification Scheme. At a more basic level, a more traditional level, there's a range of things, a range of assets that we look at, I guess, across the core industry segments. And this is really around where our experience lies in production agriculture. We don't tend to go outside of our core competency unless we can employ people or contract people who have that particular expertise. We have endless opportunities presented to us in almonds and fruits and berries and all sorts of wonderful things that I'm sure are incredibly profitable. We simply do not have the expertise internally. So we'd rather see those assets go to people who do, and we stick to our area of core competencies. Now you might ask, well, why did you do IT and why did you do meat processing? Well, the reality was the investment case was so compelling, and the challenges that we're dealing with there, particularly in the meat processing situation, was really time in motion and people management. And that was the first thing that we needed to solve. We had people that knew how to cut things up. We had people that knew, or to some extent, how to market products. But what was lacking in that process was the complete understanding of how to manage people. And that was the particular piece of expertise that we were bringing to that process. So Australian agriculture, an interesting little snapshot here as to where it is. Some really telling statistics over here in the context of 43 billion in exports, a significant industry but a very small producer to GDP. Employees directly 300,000 plus people, so a significant employer. Interestingly enough though, amongst all of that, receives less than 1% funding from government grants. So of all the things that have contributed, all the people that are fed off that, 93% of the Australian food comes from that from Australian agriculture. Yet we still export 50%. It is an incredible and amazing industry. There's some really incredible statistics there. But it does highlight that there is somewhat of a mismatch in the alignment of where government investment and funding programs and what that means, and the fact that a lot of the investment in Australian agriculture has been left to the family farms and their respective banks through debt. And we compete on a global stage where that is not really an equitable situation. There's some very, very different strategies adopted around the world, which I'm sure you're aware of. So who's investing in Australian ag? The fact is there's no commonality of what an investor looks like. They come in all shapes and sizes and demographics. From the local to the foreign, family businesses, which is the biggest percentage, corporations, high wealth individuals, and institutions. It's very rare that you find an industry like this that has such a diverse range of parties interested in investing in it and having so much of their wealth, particularly the family component, tied up in it. As Richard mentioned, the greatest percentage of this is in family partnerships, so 50%. Family partnerships are incredibly difficult. In fact, let's just face it, they're impossible to invest in if you're an external professional investor trying to work through. So this is one of the first challenges that we have in dealing with investment in agriculture, is getting the structure of the entities right to make it work. There's a lot of discussion in regards to where the foreigners are investing, and that team seems to take up a far more disproportionate amount of media time and headlines, I guess, because it sells papers and prints and whatever through the process. So here's a little comparison. On a percentage basis, as you can see there, the greatest percentage is in the territory. Pretty obvious, if they're in their territory, what they're investing in, they're investing in beef. You go to the next slide, look at it by state, that orange slide, where it says livestock, basically reads beef. So it's a pretty amazing landscape and a very short-term focused around desire of individual situations in a short-term scenario. I'll be intrigued to see what that chart looks like in 10 years' time. I dare say there will not be so much orange, or certainly as a percentage. So land use in Australia. This is quite an old map, but it's very, very salient because it deals with the difference of what exists between Australia and other parts of agricultural producing regions around the world. Again, Richard showed you some pictures of New Zealand, Brazil, look at North America. The land diversity and the land use would be nowhere near as challenging as what the country is that we live, love and operate in. It really does create some diverse circumstances, and one of the most interesting things, particularly in dealing with foreign investors, is this is the least understood part when they come to Australia, is their understanding of the geographic differences. Production zone, this is really simple, 3 zones. There's only really one zone there, which is the dark green one, that people really want to try and invest in. The problem is that the most profitable stuff is the dark grey and the light grey. They'd like to think green was covered across the entire country, but that's just not the way it works. So we have an interesting challenge in how to match investment ideas and ideals to the outcomes of what we're after and the reality of what we're dealing with. Most of this, and this came up in what Mr. Fletcher mentioned last night to some extent, is the lack of investment in regional and rural infrastructure and what that means, whether it's from a water basis or whether it's from physical infrastructure and roads and rail and what have you. We have an incredibly large continent that has a relatively low level of investment as far as moving things in the agricultural commodities and the development of what we're doing. So, as a company, what are our key investment criteria? The first one is value. Does the proposed investment represent value for money? It's a really interesting concept, something that people have varying different opinions on. We then look at whether there's the opportunity to sustainably develop. It's very easy to develop. The question is, can you do it as a sustainable long-term investment program that can be underpinned and you can get the returns of that? Is there an opportunity to improve operational efficiency? I hear very often everyone tell me that we're the world's best operators in every component of the industry. Well, there is no doubt that we have some superstars amongst our agricultural community. But it's fair to say that we have a big gap from the top 10 to the next 50,000 in the concept of what real efficiency means. And that comes down to understanding strategy, it comes down to the elements, and it also comes down to the fact that a lot of the investment, as I said earlier, and I think as Richard mentioned, is around families. And family investments often have different motivations than pure productive returns. They're about long-term holds, long-term successions. They're not purely about the greatest productivity. And the last one being, does the counterparty understand their business and its risks? One of the most intriguing things is to talk to a family farming operation and ask them about their business and do they have a business plan. I'm yet to really be wowed by anyone giving me an answer to that question. There's some people that run phenomenal businesses, but again, clearly having a documented, understood, this is where we're going, this is how we're going to get there, this is the steps we're going to take, and if this goes wrong, this is what we're going to do. When that goes wrong, this is what we're going to do. Clearly understanding that to help educate the next level of management coming through, to get the information out of people's heads and into something that we can do some education with, would be an incredibly empowering concept within Australian agriculture. We have some dead set geniuses out there, but the problem is, amazingly, unfortunately, when they get to an age that they can no longer contribute or unfortunately they pass away, that information goes with them. That is somehow we've got to deal with that in a much more sustainable manner. So the reasons why we invest, why we don't invest. So we don't invest just because it's the biggest, albeit that that's normally the first thing that the people that come from the Asian marketplace come and see us. That no matter what number we pick, it's never big enough. It really doesn't matter. So that is the last reason that we should invest in anything. Although obviously scale and economies of scale are important. We don't invest because it's the most expensive. We don't do it because somebody else has done it. We definitely don't do it if it's got a big house and garden. We rarely would even consider it if it's fully developed, or if we considered it fully developed, because that means that there's probably someone operating that's doing a fantastic job and they don't need our assistance. One of the situations that we often get told by real estate agents is this land, it's only 2 hours from Brisbane, it's only 2 hours from Sydney, 2 hours from Melbourne. Well, that is great, but I do not want to buy it from a lifestyle situation. We are trying to buy it from a productive situation. And the greatest distortion about people having land in those areas is in that proximity is because people can choose to have 5,000 acres as a lifestyle choice and drive to Melbourne, drive to Sydney, drive to Brisbane, and that's what it is. Unfortunately, that changes the productivity. And as much as we do like it, we definitely don't like it because it's pretty. In fact, we normally like to buy the ugly ducklings. We normally like to buy and look for the most challenging situations that nobody else has an interest in, because normally they represent the greatest value when we find a solution. So where does value lie? In our opinion, it lies in having some flexibility and understanding in the deal structure. And this is particularly when you're dealing with family farming situations. Often need to have, there's not a one-hat-fits-all scenario. We do need to consider the difference in it. We do need to understand the true value of assets, the land and the business. I personally have a huge problem with the way that agricultural land outside of cropping is fundamentally valued. Because benchmarking it off what the neighbour paid and referencing that as the most intelligent way to determine a market price is entirely illogical. It is the reason why we have 2 to 4% returns, because people have overpaid for land rather than treating it like a business. So the values of this world, if you're in the room, I apologise to you, but you cause me no end of grief. The reality is, our philosophy, and we prepare valuations in a very different manner. If it happens to get close to what a valuer comes up with, that's really a fluke. We do it off its productivity, off its return on investment, what it can do with development, what the infrastructure is, what the water, the sustainability of the water year-round is, and that has an internal methodology that determines what the value is to us. It'll have a very different value to the next person because they might be happy to buy it off what the neighbourhood does. But that is one of the challenges in dealing in a marketplace where we have this family element. And one of the things that really concerns me at the moment, and again, for the sake of this, I'm going to talk about beef. Beef prices have skyrocketed in the past 2 years. They've doubled. We're seeing people, and the property prices are reacting immediately. That is crazy. Simply because the commodity went boom, everything, all of a sudden, all this land is worth so much, it's not really producing anymore. It's actually just trying to get back to a normalised point where it's creating returns, where it should be creating returns. And we've got valuers and banks and everyone lending money against these inflated prices. What happens when that drops 20% next year? And even if it drops 20%, it's still going to be a great price for beef. Don't get me wrong. But what happens to the exposure of those people that have just gone and leveraged debt situations, and they go to their bank manager and say, oh, well, this is what it is, and I borrowed on an LVR basis because the value is here. LVRs are one of the most dangerous things in this concept, because that's what the accountant and the lawyer and the local bank managers often told people. But the reality is it's about the sustainable cash earnings that comes out of the cash yield. what you can afford to do the maintainable capex and maintainable operations. When I talk about this, I may as well be speaking Chinese to a lot of people because they really struggle to get their head around it. But these are the simple philosophies of business that apply to any business that we'd normally run. It's just that we somehow put a different set of rules in place when we deal with agriculture. But that is one of the key things, is getting value and certainly in our mind getting the right land. As I mentioned, and you can see them there, the development upside, etc. The technology is something, as I mentioned before, that we see as a key point that we're going to continue to invest in on a personal basis and move as we move forward. And the last one there is execution. I'm continuing to be astounded by how the number of deals that get generated, but how poorly they actually get executed. Excuse me, by a number of areas. The execution of the deal is just as important, if not more important, in getting the right value outcome and getting it in place and implementing than anything else that goes through the process. So what is the investment appetite? Well, frankly, it's everywhere at the moment. There's never been a time in Australian agriculture that we've had more sectors, from foreign, domestic, corporations, institutions to families, invested in ag. It's a really exciting time, and let's hope it stays this way for a long time to come, because it's nice to have ag being a very positive attribute in some mainstream elements. I chucked this in this morning off the back of the recent events in the United States this week. And you can see the colour coding system that's there, and this is a reference in the context of the risk of investments in countries proportional to their regulatory environment. I'll be really interested in a couple of years' time to see whether any of these colours change. But it's one of the clear things that puts Australia, and as you can see Canada and a few other places around the world, as a standout lead for global investors in linking into or investing in strong, regulatory, stable government environments. So, as I said, it'll be interesting. What are the barriers to investors? I've only got a couple of slides left to go through this. One of the great challenges that we see is the invention of the overnight expert in an agricultural investor. Unfortunately, there's no legal system or laws or degrees or whatever else that needs to be done to qualify it. Pretty much anyone that's ever owned a cow, a bit of dirt inside a crop, had a strawberry patch, done something, can be an investment advisor in agriculture. It was interesting in Richard's situation up there that one of the things that was noted was the lack of asset managers within agriculture, being a reason why superannuation funds can do. We have a lot to thank of our mainstream media for the last 20 years, because the sensationalised stories that make news are really the crap and the failures about ag. And that is one of the key challenges that it's taken over the past 10 years, in my experience, of getting people to understand that there are great investments in ag, but they don't make the financial review. They don't make the Sydney Morning Herald, they don't make the Melbourne Age, and they don't make the news stories. Generally, yes, there's a lack of understanding about agricultural risks, seasonality, and how to deal with it. As I mentioned, unsophisticated investors as the counterparty is a key challenge. Low cash yields, and that's again only low proportion of the values that we've established within the situation. As I said, I believe a lot of Australian agriculture is overvalued for what it should be doing on a sustainable basis if we're expecting people to invest and capitally improve these arrangements. Lack of people under 35 in the rural workforce. This is a really big challenge, particularly when you're looking at getting quality managers to go and operate on assets and go through that, and a lack of the infrastructure around it. I'm greatly concerned about the disintegration of rural communities. I was on holidays a couple of weeks ago in Tasmania, and one of our colleagues that was down there drove through a town. It's a former mining town, Queenstown in fact, unlike Queenstown in New Zealand, nowhere near as picturesque. Houses were for sale in Queenstown for $30,000, which meant that people could afford to take a mortgage on their welfare payments and buy a house in Queenstown. This is Australia, people. We should not have that as the basis of our rural communities and regional community support. That really is a sad state of affairs. And I think we've got to have a significant look at ourselves if we want to develop Australia and develop agriculture. What do we need to do from a government perspective to really develop these rural communities? As a company, we make a point, even if it costs more, of buying local. Now, that's probably a contradiction in the context of the amount of technology that we adopt, but the reason why we do that is when that tyre breaks, when that tyre blows and you want to go into town, you need to make sure there's a tyre company in that town. If we keep importing the stuff and bringing it in from Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane, the local tyre supplier won't be there at some point in time. That's saying to a lot of the produce situations and the various supplies that we do. Where possible, we buy it local, even if it costs more. Because it's about having the cost benefit of having a viable community. It's about employment. It's about the type of staff we get in these regions. Communities breed social activities. Social activities breed happy staff. It means why people want to go out and they're happy to live in these areas, even if they've got to drive an hour or 2 hours to town. The fact that there's something there in a community that they can go and participate in has a significant intangible benefit. That means it's part of our philosophy of how we look at it. As was mentioned last night, there's plenty of work still to be done on tariffs and trade restrictions, and we're moving forward. It is something that unfortunately we are behind, and what we need to do. The taxation system is a challenge to us in the concept of understanding of foreign investors. They really don't understand our tax system and the level of tax that's imposed on us. It's a challenge. And I put FIRB on there because that's more of a perception than reality. I don't honestly see FIRB as a true barrier. There are some things I'd like to see changed, but it is much more of a perception, and perception does create realities which causes problems. So the lessons that we've learned. Size doesn't always equal quality. Timing's everything. And about the valuation methodologies that I spoke to. So thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed the brief presentation and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.